You're listening to Improve.
My name's Chloe and I own Chloe Louise Wellbeing, which is a holistic health and wellbeing solutions company.
Hello, I'm Steve Randall, and this is Meet the Coach, where we hear from insightful coaches in wellbeing, business, and life. Let's talk, before we talk in general terms, about your journey a little bit, because I know you've got sort of very personal reasons for being involved in this area. Tell me about your challenges with anxiety and fibromyalgia.
I think anxiety is something that I think at the time I wasn't aware what it was. It wasn't as well known and well discussed as it is now. And I think it's one of those things in retrospect, that was what it was, but it just wasn't as commonly discussed. You were experiencing these things, but it wasn't so easily said, oh, that's anxiety, And then later in life, yes, I developed fibromyalgia. I kind of got to hit rock bottom with my health. And it was, when I was kind of lying on the sofa for months and not able to do anything, that was when I embarked on my journey to health and my healing journey. And in doing so, it was all about really wanting to feed my brain with all kinds of positive information and influences. And I was fortunate, really. I grew up in a family and we were all very goal-oriented, and I grew up learning about personal development and, the importance of working on yourself. So I had the idea there, and then, it was as I wanted to improve my health, really, that I kind of started watching all the Tony Robbins videos and reading and, kind of really delving into it that way. And I think personal development really is rooted in health and well-being, but maybe people don't think of it that way. But really, in order to be healthy and happy and have a fulfilled life, you have to work on yourself. So to me, the two are very intertwined.
Yeah, I love the fact you mentioned Tony Robbins, because I think for many people, he's kind of the entry point into this,
Yes,
and some people will kind of stick with Tony Robbins and do the programs and read all his books and listen to all his audio and consume everything he does. And other people sort of branch off into different directions. But he's certainly a real trailblazer for personal development and has been for many, many years. And just kind of picking up on your anxiety, because that is something which, certainly in during the course of the pandemic, more and more people have reported feeling anxious. Your anxiety, when did that start and how did it manifest itself?
I think when I look back, I was just a very anxious child. I was very fearful. I was a worrier. I had phobias and things like that from quite a young age. And then as I got older, I think it kind of became more rooted in me. And I think it was probably around the age of 18 that it became very disruptive to my life. And that's probably when I was officially probably diagnosed with it, in quote marks. I look at it in a way that I understand how my brain works, and I understand that I just have a very overactive brain. And I think when you actually take away the label of anxiety and you look at it from that point of view, like, okay, it's my brain is very overactive, it makes it more, to me anyway, it brings it more back into my control, and it makes it less of this thing that, oh, I have a label of this and so that's why I'm like it and there's not much I can do about it. This is how I work, this is my business. It's very much for me about understanding the root causes of things. But from the flip side of, say, someone who's developed anxiety during the lockdown, that might not necessarily be because they have a very overactive brain. That's, to me, is very situational. And I think we have to be careful about diagnosing someone with something when it's a situational thing that's caused it, because there is a way, like, while I'm not taking away that you're suffering with that thing in that moment, it means that it's the situation that's caused it. It's not necessarily, a chemical imbalance or whatever else it might be. It's that there's something in your life that's telling you that you need to change something. Certainly,
as that sort of highlights, there are sort of different causes of anxiety, and some of those will be quite obvious and some of them will not. But I think your strategy really of owning it in a sense and saying, okay, rather than letting it control you, you're going to control it as much as you possibly can, because that empowers you. And, that's a huge part of any area of personal development is empowering yourself and having that control.
Exactly, for sure. And this is the thing with, labeling things is, I think it's a double-edged sword, because it's reassuring to know, okay, there is something going on here, it's not all in my head. It also can help you to understand the causes of things. But I think the trouble with labels is people can come so identified with those things. And I absolutely can speak from experience on that one, because, when I was ill, and a part of healing is accepting where you're at, right? You can't move beyond something until you've accepted it. But the trouble with that is you can become so identified with it that you can't move beyond it, because it's become so integral as to who you are.
That is a really important point, actually, that these days, of course, you can get everything online. You can find any number of answers to the question you ask, some of which will be better than others. Some will be just plain wrong. But I suppose the danger is that you do almost like an actor, like a method actor, wanting to know how the character works. If you go too deep into any particular area, whether it's anxiety or something else, you may actually find it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you almost start taking on board the behaviors and just living what you're being told that it is, rather than thinking, well, hang on a minute, that wasn't what it was like a week ago until I read this thing, and now I'm doing it. And actually taking control is being informed and having information and resources, but not allowing yourself to be defined by other people and other people's views of something.
Absolutely. This is where mindset is just absolutely everything to me with health. You can be doing all the right things, but if you don't bring the right mindset to it, they're not going to have the impact that you're looking for. Acknowledging what's going on, what your experience of it is, maybe why for you it's happening, because don't forget, the list of reasons why you might be experiencing something, some of those will resonate for some people and some for others, and I think when you're into personal development and when you're doing a lot of reading or you're into health and well-being, I think what's really important is to not take everything as fact and listen to it as that's the gospel truth. It's kind of take what applies to you, take what you need from it, because I think you can become very overwhelmed or very influenced by things that maybe don't apply to you, but because do you know what I mean? Like, because you've read it and someone else has said it, you're like, you take that as truth. And it's a bit like, the memes that go around on social media and those quotes, and people read it and they go, oh yeah, that's a great quote. And they start quoting it to other people. But I'm like, do you actually understand what that means? Like, have you stopped to reflect on that and to think, you're going around saying it, but are you embodying that? Like, do you really understand that thing? And does that really apply to you? So I just think it's one of those things where there's some subjective views to be taken.
Yeah. And as with the memes, people sometimes misquote them, and over time they become very little to do with the original quote, or certainly with the original meaning. That is a whole new way of misinterpreting things and turning something good into something that can actually be quite harmful. I mean, I always think of personal development in a way as a bit like a buffet. All the stuff is laid out there. You could just, gorge on the whole lot, but you're probably not going to feel that great at the end of it. Whereas if you kind of identify the bits that are right for you, the bits that you really need at that time, and consume those, then hopefully you will have the right answers at the right time, and things will move on as you want them to do.
Absolutely. And I think what the thing about timing, especially in my experience, I'm always guided to the information I need at the right time, and I'm always able to take from things what I needed at that time that was important for me and meant for me. And then as I go on, maybe something else that didn't resonates later. As you develop and as you grow your own views, you'll start to read things and actually think, I'm not sure I do identify with that. And actually, I think it's okay to do that. It's okay to say, I understand what that person's saying. I get their viewpoint and I get the end goal. It's just I personally would like to go at it, from a different way.
The other thing that I find people often try and do is they try and do it all in one go. And, sometimes they will get a book which will say that it can make a difference to every bit of your life.
Yeah.
And maybe it can, but the idea is never that you kind of fix everything in a week and then you carry on with your life, your new, exciting, pain-free life. It's always the case that you need to work on these things, although having a sort of a holistic approach to it and recognizing that there may be different bits that are needing some attention, but focusing on one bit at a time so that you do that well and then move on to the next bit.
Absolutely. And doesn't that just embody us as a society wanting everything now, wanting the quick fixes? And, and actually I use the analogy of a pill with health and well-being. Take, for example, meditation, right? If I was to tell you all the many, many, many benefits that you can get from meditation, and I was to say, right, you can get them all in this pill, everyone would want to take it, without doubt. But because meditation takes time, it takes discipline, it takes work, and it can take time to see the benefits, and it's the same with any health and wellbeing program. And I would say anyone that promises you results instantly is, you might see results, but I don't think they're going to be long lasting. To establish a really healthy lifestyle, it takes time. And unfortunately, people sometimes, because they can't see the end goal in sight, they forget the benefit to them, even if it does take time. I think of my journey, and I think if 4 years ago you had have said to me, right, this is going to happen to you, and it's going to be very difficult and very challenging, and then it's going to take you 4 years to heal from that. At the time, I might have gone, oh God, no, I don't want it to take 4 years. I want it to happen now. And maybe I would have been put off from doing it. But if I had never embarked on that journey, I would never be where I am today. It's like, if you never start because it's going to take X amount of time, well, then you're never going to get the benefits in the long run. And I would have spent the rest of my life like that.
It is important to just take any steps, however few those steps are, at least you're going in the right direction. If you do nothing, the minimum that's going to happen is you're going to stay where you are, and potentially you're going to start to slip back. And then it's even more challenging to try and get to where you want to be.
Yeah. And look at life as, say, you live for 80 to 100 years. If it takes you 4 years or even 10 years to improve from where you are, you're then going to have the rest of your life to enjoy this new place that you're at. Whereas if you never start because it's going to take too long, you're never going to get that benefit. And also, it's not just about the end goal, it's about the journey. And the journey itself is so fulfilling. And really, it's that with health, well-being, personal development, there is no end goal, really. Because you're always going to be able to improve. And I think maybe people underestimate the joy that they'll get from just embarking on the journey.
Yeah, definitely. And also, of course, life changes. Things happen in life. It's not the case that the way you are at one particular age will be the way you are, even a year later, let alone 20, 30, 40 years later. Life has those challenges, but also those wonderful things that happen that change not only your well-being, the actual physical material thing that's happened, but it also changes your perspective. And the big one for that, of course, is having children. And everybody that I've ever spoken to who's become a parent will say it changed the way I look at things. And there's no way really that it can't. So what you might need before that, for example, would be different afterwards.
And also, in that, the things that you can look at as the greatest challenges in life are actually going to be the greatest gifts. And I absolutely stand by that. When I was very ill, and that was a very challenging time, but I tell you what, it's going to sound really cliche, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I wouldn't change my journey. And I'm genuinely really grateful for that time, because it set me on this path. And I think the other thing to always remember is that every little part of your journey had to happen for you to get where you are. And so anything that anyone might be going through, it's kind of looking at it through that lens of, what is this trying to teach me? How is this trying to help me improve my life? And I'm a strong believer that things like anxiety and depression or health challenges are opportunities for us to turn our lives around. You know, they're warning signs to us that something isn't right, you know, whether that's something in our past that we need to release or something in our present that isn't right for us. You know, it's warning signs from the universe telling us, you know, it's time to take action.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. When you look back at challenging times,
Yeah.
and everybody's had them, even young kids, they will be able to look back at a time when something went wrong or they faced a really tough situation at that time. And then you look back at it, and either you look back and you say, well, actually, maybe I made a bit too much of that at the time. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was, or it was really bad at the time. And look where I am now. Look how I came through it. You know, if I can get through that, then I can get through any challenge.
Absolutely. And keeping things in perspective is really important as well. You know, not becoming too overwhelmed by things. And like we said, you know, it's really important to accept what you're going through, but also not letting yourself be overwhelmed by that. You know, and I'm all about validating how you're feeling and what you're going through, but also it's good to remember that someone else, or not good to remember, it's a horrible thing to remember, but someone else is always going to be going through something worse than you. And I think that just does, I don't know why, that's always stuck with me so strongly. And when I was ill, you know, it was very much important to remember that, okay, this really sucks, but there's things that I'm so grateful and so lucky to have in my life to help me through this that other people don't, or, you know, other people are going through something so much worse. So, you know, if this is my lot, if this is the thing that I have to deal with, well, I'll take that, you know, I'll be grateful for that. And I think, you know, it's a balancing act between validating how you're feeling and accepting where you're at, but also keeping it in perspective. We underestimate our ability to be resilient, and actually a really fascinating thing that I discuss as part of my workshops is the way in which the mind works, that you know, hedonic adaptation, whereby we get used to things, no matter whether that's good or bad. So the idea of something, whether it's a good thing that we think in quote marks like winning the lottery, or whether it's a bad thing like losing a limb. And they've done studies where people's expectations of how good or how bad they might feel in those situations is so much more extreme than it is at that time. And maybe at the beginning, you know, so we've all heard of the examples of what lottery winners at the beginning, they're ecstatic, and then by the end of it, they're broke and it's the worst thing that ever happened to them. And conversely, the person who lost a limb at the beginning, yes, okay, it was horrific and it's awful, but then they are no more or less happy, and the studies have proved this, than other people.
It's that thing of kind of whatever situation you've got, it's not what you've got or what you're dealing with, it's how you deal with it, how you perceive it, and what you want to do with that. So, for example, taking the lottery win as an example, you know, if you end up with £50 million in the bank, now, if you just think, this is fantastic, I'm going to have a lifestyle of partying, I'm going to, you know, buy everything I've ever wanted, you know, I'm just going to go crazy, you know, live that hedonistic lifestyle, then, yeah, maybe for a while, that'll give you a bit of a buzz, but then eventually you'll start questioning who your friends are. You'll start perhaps feeling guilty about having blown a load of money when there are terrible things going on. Whereas if you're the sort of person who thinks, right, I've got £50 million in the bank from this lottery win, I don't really need to change anything massively in my life, but it's great to not have to worry about money. But what can I do with this that will make a difference to other people's lives? How can I use this for good? Then longer term, you're going to benefit.
Absolutely. And I think there you've also touched on a really important subject of purpose, and you know, using that money for good, for something greater than yourself. People get so stuck on this idea of purpose, and what is my purpose, and how do I find purpose, and I don't know what my purpose is, and is this real thing? But actually purpose to me is very simple. It's something that gives you joy, and in most cases it's contributing to something outside of yourself, something greater than yourself. So it could even be, and I don't know if if we've heard examples, for example, a janitor, the person who cleans the floors of an office building, and they take great pride in their work because they are keeping the floors clean for everyone to come and do their work, and that's a sense of purpose for them. Similarly to the person that wants to end world hunger, right? It's anyone's purpose can be anything where you have applied meaning to the thing that you do, and it gives you joy. And I know they're two very extreme examples, but I absolutely don't mean that to demean janitors at all, because again, it's such important work. We everyone in society plays important roles, no matter what job they're doing.
Sometimes people do get hung up on that thing of, and it has definitely got worse through social media and things, where people kind of think, okay, well, if other people are doing this, then I should be doing that as well. And almost ignoring the very point you're making there, that if we all did what a social media influencer, for example, did, or a certain celebrity did, if we were all doing that, who's doing the other stuff? We have all got that important role to play. Yeah. And for many people, although they wouldn't necessarily consider it their purpose, perhaps, just being a great friend, or being a great parent, or being a great daughter or son, just supporting other people, maybe that's their purpose. Yes. Maybe that's what we're here for, and the person we're supporting needs that support so that they can do what it is that's their purpose. And it's almost like a pyramid. Eventually you get to the point where everyone's supporting everybody else, and the person at the top of the pyramid is the one who's going to change the world.
I just absolutely love that point, because this is the whole point, that every soul on this planet has purpose. Everyone is playing a part in something greater than themselves, whether they realize it or not. A great example, smiling at someone that you walk past could save their life, and you could have absolutely no idea. They could have been walking home from work thinking about ending their life, and you could have smiled at them, and that simple smile just could have given them the hope that they needed, and just little small things like that. And I think purpose can be associated with such grandiose ideas, right? It's this grandiose thinking, and it doesn't have to be that. Great, it can be that, and absolutely nothing wrong with that if that's what you want for your life, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, and let's not put ourselves under that pressure to kind of find those big things, because we're not all going to do it. We're not supposed to all do it. No. And we do what we do. And if you're doing that to the best of your ability, and I love that whole thing of, just smiling at somebody, or maybe just having, and I try and do this as much as I possibly can, just passing the time of day with somebody when you go into a shop or into a petrol station or something, rather than it all being transactional, actually make it human. We hear a lot about people doing jobs that they don't enjoy doing. And if somebody's working in a coffee shop, maybe they don't really enjoy their job, but it's helping to pay the bills. It can be quite mundane, some of that stuff. And we can all help to have that social interaction that changes it and just makes it, okay, so now this is not just a thing. It's not a process. It's actually human contact, and it's real life.
Precisely that. And that's exactly the thing about kindness, and and treating each person with a sense of gratitude for what it is they're doing, because without that person who worked at the coffee shop, you wouldn't be able to get your coffee and that you love so much in the mornings. And similarly, the person at the checkout, how often do we say hello, have a good weekend, how are you today? Because also what we're all seeking is connection. We are all seeking that. We're all seeking human connection in one way or another. And I think what we totally underestimate and undervalue is the connection that we get from the person on the street or the checkout or whoever it might be that we part, strangers. That connection can feel so much more even satisfying and fulfilling than, those really close relationships we have. I don't know, maybe it's because it gives us a sense of, that we are all one and we're all connected in some way. And I think maybe, if you're seeking social connection and you don't feel like you have enough of it, maybe just start doing that. Say hello to the person on the street, smile, talk to the person at the checkout, and just see how it makes you feel. And I think maybe people will be surprised by the impact it can have in how they feel about themselves and their life.
I mean, I do think that the sort of rise in going back to anxiety, the rise in people reporting themselves as feeling anxious, it almost correlates to the perception, certainly, that the world has become and continues to become a more unfriendly place where we are less connected. Because very often people will feel absolutely relaxed and and happy and not anxious when they're with friends and family. They're in those sort of comfort zones, perhaps. But when they're out and about in the bigger, wider world, they feel that the world is unfriendly and worry about how people will perceive them if they are feeling anxious, if they have panic attacks, for example. And it's because we've lost that connection that was, I'm sure, once there. You probably have to go back quite a few years to really have that time when everybody knew, the times where everyone knew everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's tricky in the world that we live and with the busy lives and the way that we live and the places that we live. But we can do little bits towards getting that connection with people, and it'll make us all feel better.
I think you've touched on so many different things there that we could talk for hours on. But I think
I have a tendency to do that. I'm sorry.
No, I'm thinking I've got like 10 different separate topics in my head that, we could go on tangents of. But I just think, I would really like, we've kind of gone full circle here, but the point of anxiety and the pandemic, and I think the point we had made before about situational anxiety versus, in quote marks, there being something wrong. I think that's something to remember about the pandemic, and everyone's feeling it, right? We felt really anxious because we were isolated, and now everyone's feeling really anxious in social situations because they've been isolated. And there's very good science on that I don't think we have time for me to elaborate on. But I'm going to share a blog post actually on that, so that there will be more information coming out. But it's so important to remember that that really is how important social connection is, and the idea that making interaction more human. So, remembering, for example, that we are, everyone is kind of feeling that way, I think is a really good thing to remember, is that, we've all been feeling that sense of anxiety during isolation, and now we're all kind of feeling that sense of unease and anxiety around socializing again, perhaps humanizing that idea so that people aren't thinking, oh, there's something wrong with me, oh, I'm feeling so much anxiety, and oh, I have anxiety, and again, identifying with it, look at it as a situational thing where it will pass, because again, you'll adapt. The same way we'd adapted to being isolated, we will adapt again to being around other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really hope we can get to a situation where people do have that deeper connection, because it ticks so many boxes of being able to, not in a box ticking exercise, but actually, if you go through and you think, okay, what are the big problems in society? And even things like climate change, we all need to be connected. We all need to be on board and talking about these things in the same messaging. Whether it's any ism, really, whether it's racism, whether it's sexism, whether it's, LGBTQ plus rights, any of those sort of things. It often comes down to people not understanding other people and not connecting with other people. And if they didn't have the barriers and they did connect with those other people, they would very often find that they're exactly the same as them. Underneath the skin, we are all the same.
Absolutely. And that's exactly it. It's perhaps bringing a sense of seeing each other as fellow human beings, right? Why do you see that person as, this is exactly it. Why do you see that person as being separate from yourself? Why is that person not allowed to feel that way? Or, we're so judgmental And I know some of it is from bias that's kind of, maybe evolutionary or from your religious beliefs or, whatever it might be. But just perhaps bringing a sense of humanity back into our connections, whether that's at work or, out on the streets or in your own homes, treating people as fellow human beings and not as something separate to yourself.
What's the thing that you have kind of identified as being where you need to go with this to help people and organizations?
For me, it's, the reason I say it's a holistic health and wellbeing company is because I think there perhaps is a mismatch between, well, not a mismatch, there is, it's not being linked so much, the connection between mental and physical health. And I think you kind of find a lot of people discussing one or the other. And my view and where I come from is the place of understanding the connection between the two and really understanding the science behind that and how the body influences the mind and vice versa. When you start talking about mind-body connection and how the mental and the physical interact, maybe people can think it's all a bit woo-woo and fluffy. And I think health and well-being, to be honest, when I started on this 3 or 4 years ago, health and well-being was seen as a very fluffy thing and a box-ticking exercise. And really, I think the reason I focus so heavily on the science is because, I want to make it very real for people and not have it be seen as this fluffy thing that, people don't have time to do.
As with so many different industries and different services that are provided, sometimes it's all down to semantics. There's some changes in words are possibly needed. I mean, everybody kind of knows what the well-being industry is to some extent, but in a way, it's just life, isn't it? It's just living a good life, and maybe that's too non-specific, and that's why that wouldn't work as the brand, but that is what it is. It's the fabric of life, isn't it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I do a whole section on that, on a lifestyle and really how everything, so all my areas of well-being, they kind of accumulate at the end of the program as lifestyle, the same way I would look at culture within a company from a whole company perspective. Lifestyle is about the individual perspective. So how the company operates versus how the individual lives, they're the same thing, just on different scales. But what's really important is that those things are exactly what supports the environment for behavior change. And it's very easy to talk about health and well-being and to educate people, but actually really implementing change comes from creating an environment that supports those behavior changes.
Yeah, and I think that's a good analogy, actually, the sort of well-being and personal development and company culture, because just as company culture won't really work if you just speak to a consultant on company culture, put together a document, put the document out, and then it's forgotten. That's not going to work. And in the same way, all those books and other pieces of content that are around that claim to change, this will change your life.
Yeah.
Well, it may for 5 minutes, but it won't change your life forever because you have to, as we've said, work on what you need to work on at the time you need to work on it. So one particular thing will never change your whole life. It'll maybe pivot it slightly or just refocus it slightly.
The reason those books probably sell so much is because, again, like we said, people want quick fixes. People want to see things now. And I think the reason why maybe a lot of health and well-being initiatives or perhaps people that have read a book and it worked for a couple of weeks and then it didn't and they say, oh, that's a load of rubbish. Well, actually, it's because you haven't seen the effect quick enough and so you've given up. Whereas health and well-being should be looked at as a long-term thing. It's about sustainable change. It's not about, and as you said before, it's not about changing everything right now. It's about changing things in small steps so that they last and they add up to big change.
That is a good point to end on, apart from, of course, telling people where they can find out more about you.
So I have my website, chloelouisewellbeing.com. Very simple, and I'm on LinkedIn. I don't have any social media. I don't personally
Good for you.
agree with it, right? and for personal reasons, and so my company is going to follow suit. So yeah, you can find me at chloelouisewellbeing.com.
Thanks for listening to Meet the Coach. You can find out more about all of our guests at improveradio.com.
Improve Personal Development Radio.